Next level. Next level.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? We are back. Had to skip last Thursday, but it is now hopefully back onto the regular schedule of Monday and Thursday live streams where we talk about tech stuff here at the Go Cell Phone Repair channel. Today we have, well, actually yesterday, an iPad that exploded inside of an Apple store. So see, it doesn't just happen outside of the company. ISPs are asking for more money, but they don't want to be regulated, which is a bit of a, well, we'll talk about it. Huawei caught using a DSLR instead of a phone camera for a commercial promoting one of their phones. Why? Doesn't make any sense. Ted Cruz thinks net neutrality is not needed because the internet's still here and it's still working, right? Somewhat? Okay. You're smarter than that, Ted. You really are. Sony's XZ2 takes the best low-light videos ever, and Australians could soon go to jail for 10 years if they refuse to unlock their phones. What? All right, let's talk tech. Hey, glad to see you guys here. Nate, what's going on? Greg M. Carl. Yeah, I had to skip last week, had a whole bunch of weird stuff happening, and ironically enough, after I made arrangements to figure out how to do a live stream on Thursday after my training, which ends at 6, and have the live stream start at 6, turns out we had no internet here anyways. And 3 times last week, my internet completely shut down. So I don't know what's going on, but I have a few conspiracy theories that we can talk about regarding that one. First up, though, I wanted to get into this Apple battery explosion inside what appears to be an Apple store. Now, they say Apple shop, and I'm not sure why, but this is in Amsterdam, And yesterday, they're saying that 3 employees had to be treated for minor injuries. Those were related to breathing after an iPad battery exploded inside of the store. And it wasn't that there were no projectiles or anything. Nobody got injured by the explosion itself. But of course, when lithium-ion batteries rupture, especially when they explode or catch fire, they tend to release some pretty noxious gases that you don't want to be breathing. So they had to take a few people to the hospital. I would assume it's not life-threatening, but still something you definitely want to be concerned about. And more so lately, I've been thinking about all of the old batteries that we have stored inside of our repair facilities. And we usually put them inside of a plastic container, but of course, every time you open up that plastic container, you get a nice big whiff of lithium-ion fumes, which is probably not a good thing. So I'm thinking that maybe storing those things, I don't know, outside or somewhere else, like where can you really make that stable enough so that it will be safe? In any case, it looks like Apple is investigating the incident, and the staff were able to evacuate customers and everyone else safely, and the store reopened shortly afterwards. So they had initially put this iPad, which I guess was smoking or something, into a sand-filled bucket, which sounds like a good idea, in case of an explosion. But of course, you've still got those gases being released, so you need to get some air, some ventilation, and get away from the thing that's releasing the gases. And then, of course, what do you do with it? Is there really an eco-friendly way to dispose of batteries, period, nowadays, now that we can't just ship everything out to China and have them worry about it? I don't know the answer to that, but it should probably be a concern, I think, for all of us, just because we carry these things around in our pockets all the time. I'm not saying every single phone out there is a ticking time bomb, but they do have the potential to do some damage under a number of different circumstances. And one of these, they're saying, is after more of these incidents have been taking place since Apple has started its iPhone battery replacement program. So this is not something that we can blame on third-party repair or aftermarket batteries. This is something that actually happened in the Apple Store. It's been happening with customers who have batteries that came originally with the phone. So at the same time, we see unfortunately, a lot of tech publications saying, oh, well, the reason your phone exploded or caught on fire is because you took it to someone who wasn't Apple to work on it. Well, Apple's not immune to that problem either, so we probably don't want to throw those stones, right? Carl, fighting the battle of crazy life. Yeah, me too, man. Life is fast. That's true. You skipped Thursday. What was I watching? I don't know, Nate. Were you watching on Thursday? Because I was not here on last Thursday because of a number of stupid things that happened. Scales and more. Hey, welcome to the stream. We all know that that's not a real Apple store. It's a bootleg Airbone store. Really? Okay. I'm not going to argue that because I don't know. And this is a Getty image, so I don't know how legit this photo is. I don't know what kind of store this is really. But this is on BBC, which coincidentally, I started looking into, because we've got all this fake news all over the place, right? I started doing some research, and would you believe that BBC is like the most trusted news source in the world right now, which kind of says something about a lot of places, including us. How do you handle your batteries, Mike? The used ones to be thrown away. I have a box under my desk currently, but I need a better solution. Yeah, Nate, this is the thing. We have a big tub, big plastic tub, or actually at one of our stores, we have a big old used protein supplement jar that we take off the top, throw the battery in, and put the top back on. But I don't think either of those are really a good way to handle this stuff. And what I was thinking, especially, after seeing this and knowing that we smell that funny kind of sweet smell that comes from ruptured batteries, we don't want to have a big container of batteries that is, airtight otherwise, but as soon as you open it to put a battery inside, all those fumes are escaping. So I don't have a good answer for you there. We probably want to dispose of them as soon as possible. Maybe a small plastic bag or something that we could seal them inside of before we put them into a larger container. And beyond that, as far as getting, disposing of them, they do have recycling centers. And I want to say, last time I checked, I believe that you can go to a few different retailers, and it might have been Staples and Office Depot, but if you check in your area for battery recycling, you should be able to find someone who will accept them. They don't pay for them anymore, and in some cases, I've had a few companies tell me that you have to pay them in order to give them the batteries. And the sad thing about this, of course, is that a lot of them just end up going into the trash, and future generations will have some nice lithium ion tainted water to drink from. And you know, that's not the number one pollutant, but it's certainly amongst the things that are going into the environment one way or another. I would think a metal vessel would be better due to low melting point of plastics and off-gassing during fire. Good point, Greg. It's probably much better to store them in something that's not going to melt or catch on fire easily. I'm going to look into that and see if we can't come up with the solution, because this is definitely an occupational hazard, not to mention potential fire, customers breathing gases when they come into your stores. I mean, all sorts of fun stuff, right? And this is one of my gripes right here. One of the things that we've been waiting for over the last decade, at least, I think, the number one demand that we hear from customers is, man, I wish I could get a battery or a phone with a battery that will last a decent amount of time, that I don't have to charge it every day. And as the phone gets older, you have to charge it every 10 hours and then every 8 hours. And pretty soon you feel like you're stuck to your charger all the time, right? So meanwhile, manufacturers continue to develop all of this cutting edge technology when it comes to the features on the phone. You know, we finally got wireless charging on a lot of handsets. We had infrared for a while. We've got near field communications. We're working on foldable screens. I mean, there's all this cool stuff that's coming out that probably many of us really don't care about. But we've been asking for good batteries for a very, very long time. And as it stands, lithium ion is almost maxed out as far as how much of a charge we can get out of a single battery. So they've been slowly improving them over the last, since the 90s basically. We actually talked about this last week. Lithium ion batteries are getting to the point where there really is no way that they can become more efficient, that they can store more of a charge. We are running out of easy ways to get a hold of the materials used to manufacture them, especially cobalt. That's something that we're not seeing. You know, it's getting hard to get a hold of. And as we build rechargeable car batteries, you know, all of a sudden this market is just finding itself in a position where raw materials are going to be a problem. So the focus of all these manufacturers, I would think, would be, how do we come up with a better solution for safer, quick charging, longer lasting batteries? And it really doesn't seem, you know, if we look at what's available, it doesn't seem like anyone's really made that a priority. You think that they would, but not happening. Yes, it's much more important to have your phone be thinner and lighter and have some goofy aspect ratio, so that even when you turn it into landscape mode and watch a widescreen video, you've still got black bars on the end, because the videos aren't made to be, you know, a 180-degree view, at least not with a flat screen. So I don't know. I suspect that they're concentrating in the wrong areas. Now, obviously, most of these companies are buying these lithium-ion batteries from a third-party manufacturer, so it's not really their product. But if you wanted to get rich, or if you wanted to get a patent on something that would make you tons and tons and tons of money, maybe if you put some R&D into a battery or into an alternative type of battery, that would be a good idea. Just saying. Just my idea. So yeah, I'll look into this, scales and more. I don't know. I mean, this is BBC and it doesn't say Apple Store. So that was what kind of made me question this. And obviously this is a stock photo. This could be a completely different store. I don't know. This was just yesterday, but I'll definitely do some research and find out where this was. You know, hard to say, but if they had Apple employees, they're referring to this as Apple is now investigating the incident. That would lead me to believe that this was a legitimate Apple store. But again, we'll have to wait until a little more information is available before we can say without a shadow of a doubt, of course, whether or not that was an Apple store. So I want to move on here to something else that's just irony. So speaking of last Thursday, not being able to use the internet, not having a connection, my broadband has been going on and off for the last couple of weeks. And it's not just me. There are people who are at least 10 to 15 miles away from me who have also been losing their entire internet connection, businesses that can't connect, they can't do anything, and nobody seems to know why, except that apparently our local ISP is having some network challenges. That's the best answer I've got so far. Now, meanwhile, this is an interesting thing. ISPs are saying that they can't expand broadband unless the government gives them more money. And what that means is that, let me read just a few lines here off of this article. Broadband providers have spent years lobbying against utility-style regulations. They do not want to be regulated. They don't want to be considered a public utility like the electric company, like the gas company, like the water company, because they don't want anyone telling them how much money they can charge people for their services. And you get the idea, right? So they don't want to be regulated. Those regulations would protect consumers from high prices and bad service, because if you're not regulated, you can kind of do what you want and say supply and demand. I've got the product. If you want it, here's the price, and you get what you get. But now broadband lobby groups are arguing that internet service is similar to utilities such as electricity, gas distribution, roads, and water and sewer networks. Why? Because they want help building out their networks. That's why. So when it comes down to, what can we get out of this deal? They tell you one thing, but when it comes to what are you going to be held accountable for, then they choose the other side of the issue. And this is frustrating, and I don't think that there's any way that they can really get away with saying they want, we get the best of both worlds. Of course, we are surprised that the FCC overturned net neutrality despite what the public wanted and despite the protests on their website. And we now know that they basically lied and said that they had a denial of service attack on their website and that they had been hacked, and that never happened. And then more recently, Ajit Pai came out and said he knew that this was false since like February of this year, but he wasn't allowed to talk about it. So he couldn't come out publicly and say, yeah, that was a lie because of some other ongoing case that was happening. So it's getting real sketchy as far as what you can believe. Not that it wasn't already, but it just seems to be getting worse and worse. Like electricity, broadband is essential to every American. I think that most of us would agree with that. As of today, the U.S. Telecom CEO Jonathan Spalter and NTCA CEO Shirley Bloomfield wrote Monday in an op-ed for the Topeka Capital Journal. Yet, U.S. broadband infrastructure has been financed largely by the private sector without assurance that such costs can be recovered through increased consumer rates. So again, as I stated, ISPs want the benefits, not the responsibilities. I mean, there is a saying, and I think that it applies here and in many other areas of life, and that is very simple. Everybody wants to win. So all of these companies that exist are going to do what's in their best interest and try to reap the benefits of things that are available to them. And if they can do both at the same time and we let them get away with it, well, what's going to stop them, right? Utility regulation over broadband can only inhibit incentives for network investment, AT&T warned in November 2017. And this is what broadband companies have been saying for the longest time now, is that if we have net neutrality, we will not be able to fund and build out our networks. So now net neutrality is gone, but they're saying that they would like to be treated by a utility because they need some assistance to build out those same networks that they said that they were going to do on their own. So come on, guys. Let's try to start making some sense here, or at least fabricate some sort of explanation that makes it sound like you're really trying to do the right thing. Because what we're doing here is just coming out and saying, yeah, we want all the good stuff. We're going to take advantage of that, but we also want to get rid of net neutrality so we can basically do what we want and not be treated like a regulated utility. It's just, my head wants to explode right now. Broadband partners need a committed partner to finish the job of connecting unserved communities. The partner should be all of us as Americans. To me, that sounds like regulation or something worse. In the form of our government, they wrote. And what they're talking about specifically are rural areas where they don't feel that there's enough of a population to pay in order to build out their network. So they do not want to fund those networks, although they need to exist, because if they don't, then competition can come in and build out their own networks, which these guys have been trying to fight for the longest time, which is really sad. So of course, private internet service providers already receive various subsidies from states and the federal government, including $1.5 billion a year. So when you hear people complain about, well, we shouldn't be spending government money on this, we shouldn't be spending our tax money on this, how many people speak up and say, you know what, I don't want $1.5 billion of my tax money going to a privately owned internet service provider? You don't hear that. You don't hear anyone getting mad and calling these the welfare companies that are taking advantage of tax money that people are paying for their own selfish interest to increase the profit. You don't really hear about that, right? In any case, $1.5 billion a year being allocated for rural networks from the Federal Communications Commission Connect America Fund, big surprise there. Despite this, telcos like AT&T have mostly avoided upgrading their copper networks to fiber, except in areas where they face competition from cable companies, we noted in a recent article. So yes, we're back to supply and demand. They're not going to do it unless they have to, unless they have some competition. And at the same time, they don't want to be regulated, but they do want the free money to help build out the network, which means that you and I will help to pay for that network that is owned by a private company. Doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Give us more money, they say, but the increased subsidies for private ISPs proposed by the U.S. Telecom NTCA report apparently wouldn't come with any limits on what carriers can charge customers. The report says, and I'm quoting, only 3 options or some combination thereof are possible in such low density areas. 1, prices are higher in low density areas to reflect higher costs. 2, service is not offered in low density areas since demand is insufficient to cover the high costs. And or 3, the higher costs of providing service are subsidized at least partially. The public and the FCC are disinclined to accept higher prices in rural areas, which often have lower incomes. The remaining choice is between subsidizing broadband by some method or leaving the most rural areas of the U.S. without broadband service. So you're either out of luck or it's subsidized by tax dollars while still being unregulated. How does that make any sense? The municipal option, the federal government has offered billions of dollars to CenturyLink and AT&T, resulting in little infrastructure improvement. Despite funding, speeds still do not meet the FCC definition of broadband. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance, ILSR, notes in a fact sheet. So we've been talking about this for a long time. And by the way, everyone, the sources for this information are posted down in the video description. So if you want to click down there and check out these articles for yourself, be my guest. There's one more thing on here that I thought was interesting. U.S. Telecom and NTCA both fought an FCC attempt to preempt state laws that limit the spread of municipal broadband, and they cheered in 2016 when a court struck down the FCC attempt to allow expansion of city-run broadband networks. So they're fighting this the whole time, and yet they want more money because they don't have enough money to do it by themselves. And I want to say there was no, it's a different article. So yeah, and again, ironically, we get rid of net neutrality, and I give everyone the benefit of the doubt. I think that this is coincidence and totally unrelated, but ever since that happened, my broadband has been going on and off. So I don't know. Maybe they really are watching me and punishing me for talking about it. I couldn't tell you. Hold on. Didn't they want no net neutrality to allow them to invest in their networks? Says Greg. I smell something rotten. Me too. So this is exactly my point. They don't want net neutrality because with net neutrality, they can't build out their networks. And now that it's gone, they're still complaining that they don't have enough money to do it. So you don't just give federal funds to someone who's non-regulated to do with what they please. Well, I guess you kind of do in some situations. It is mostly applicable to rural areas. This is where they want the government to build infrastructures. That's the thing. Because it is not profitable, all they want is profits. Shocker. I'm okay with that. I understand that private companies want profits. But if you want profits and you want to be a private company, don't come begging for a handout, right? Doesn't that make sense? If you're saying that without net neutrality, we'll be able to put the money into our infrastructure, except where we don't think that there's a lot of wealthy people or, not enough of a population that we get a return on investment. What happens to those people? What happens to that part of your network when you say that you're serving this entire area? Now you want some federal funding. And my understanding is the last time that happened, a lot of that funding never ended up being reinvested into the network and instead went to increasing the size of the stockholders' wallet. So that's just what I've been told. Anyways, let's get off that one. No, I just thought that was worth talking about because it's so ironic that they would say, yes, we don't want to be regulated, but we want the benefits of being regulated. What are you guys talking about? All right, let's move on here. Huawei caught faking a DSLR shot as smartphone pictures in a commercial. Why would you do that? You know, we've been watching Huawei for a while, and even though we won't be likely to see their handsets in the US, not very much in the near future anyways, they are dominating. They are now the #2 phone producer in the world, second only to Samsung when we talk about number of units sold. So I want to make that distinction. Obviously, Apple at the top for the total number of dollars, Apple selling more in the ways of dollars as opposed to Huawei. I think that Samsung I think Samsung is a close second actually. But in any case, Huawei has, next to Samsung, sold during the second quarter of 2018 more handsets than Apple. So this is a big company. They got some cool stuff coming out in 2019. They want to have the first foldable phone. They've got this crazy camera setup. Their latest P20, was that the P20 Pro? I think it was. I mean, they look amazing. And yet here they got caught making a commercial to promote their Nova 3 smartphone, and apparently didn't really ever say that they were using that phone to take the photo, right? But if you're making a commercial about a phone and you're showing people taking still images or videos or anything, you would kind of assume that the product that you're showing in the commercial is a representation of where that media came from, right? Where the pictures are being taken. I guess that wasn't the case. So what happened here? There was a behind the scenes photo, and the way that they found out, they've got a couple bickering, apparently. I haven't seen this commercial. But a since deleted Instagram picture posted by Sarah Elshami, or Elshami, I'm not sure. The actress in the scene reveals that instead of a fun selfie from the Nova 3, the shot in question came from a DSLR. So they made it look like they were taking a selfie, but they did not actually use the phone that they were advertising. Why would you do that? In fact, the Nova 3 doesn't seem to be in the frame at all. It doesn't seem too smart. You know, I mean, Huawei doing a lot of things right, having a tough time here because, well, everyone's saying don't buy any Chinese phones or phones that are manufactured by companies that used to be partially owned by or invested by the Chinese government. That's the explanation that we've been given. In Huawei's defense, the ad never outright claims that the picture was shot on a Nova 3, and at the same time, in defense of Apple and Samsung, their commercials don't really say that you should dive to the bottom of the swimming pool with your phone. But if you watch the commercials, a lot of times you'll get the impression that that wouldn't be a problem, right? I mean, especially when Samsung launched the Galaxy S5 and they showed the phone sitting by a sink being splashed with water, you thought, wow, this must be a waterproof phone, right? And then you read the small print and it's water resistant, and no one really makes that distinction anymore. You know, it's at the point where those two terms are interchangeable for the most part. And ironically, I just opened up an iPhone 7 yesterday to perform an audio IC repair, and that phone was completely sealed, had never been opened, no physical damage, and the top sticker for the moisture indication was tripped. It was definitely red, so how the water got in there, I have no idea. No signs of corrosion, but obviously if you take that phone to Apple and show them that there's a red sticker on the inside, whatever's wrong with it is now your problem because you have liquid damage on your water-resistant phone. So, yeah, truth in advertising, I don't know if there is such a thing anymore. It's a curious conundrum. But it's unfortunate, really, that Huawei is doing the same thing here. Still, it would be nice if Huawei would stick to advertising its phone based on the strength of what it can actually do, which is probably impressive enough, even without fakery. Yeah, well, there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and it looks like the font in this video, I don't know where it's from. It's either Middle Eastern, Indian, or I'm not sure what language that is, but I'm assuming this was somewhere outside the US, outside of Europe, it looks like too. So next up, you gotta love this guy's, probably my two least favorite faces in the world right now, Ted Cruz and Ajit Pai. I know I'm back on the same topic, but you gotta hear this because it's just ridiculous. It's almost where we just say, nowadays, instead of being honest, you tell a lie and then you just kind of double down on the lie. And if you tell a big enough lie and believe it yourself, maybe everyone else will too. That's the impression that I get every time I turn on the news and listen to politicians or otherwise. So Ted Cruz reduces the net neutrality debate to one blindingly bad question. You want to guess what it is? I'm going to tell you. It is, does this internet still work, or something along those lines? So for the entire history of the internet, the FCC had not declared the authority to regulate prices and terms of the service on the internet. Net neutrality wasn't required for the entire history of the internet, going back all the way to, what, 1990 something? Well, I mean, obviously it was around long before then, but definitely a lot different than the way that we see it today, right? I mean, the internet today is not the same as the internet was in 2000, not to mention 95, or if you go all the way back to the very first version of the internet, which was, what, I think the late 70s or something like that. Completely different things. So yes, the internet is still here, but net neutrality, it says, wasn't required for the entire history of the internet. So we didn't need net neutrality, and that reference nakedly puts forth an idea that internet technology has remained static forever, and that is the problem. And that is why cheap arguments like this don't go very far, and they don't fool anyone. And it's unfortunate that people will still go on TV, go in public and represent themselves this way, and offer these very short statements that are easy to remember, so that instead of understanding what's really happening, people can just say, well, the internet's still here, right? It's an easy answer. Oh, you like net neutrality? Well, it's gone now and the internet's still here, so I guess we didn't need net neutrality, right? That's a bit like saying, well, we still have cigarettes and not everyone has cancer, so I guess that means cigarettes are okay, right? No, there are some problems already happening because net neutrality is gone, and I resent both of these people and their arguments so much I can't even tell you. But this is the question that Ted Cruz asked Ajit Pai: has the internet ceased to function? Implying that if it hasn't, then apparently we don't need net neutrality because everything's just fine, right? It has not, Senator, responded Pai with this smirk. There's the picture. This is what this guy's face looked like when he said that. How do you... I don't know how this guy sleeps at night. Probably comfortably on a pillow made of money, I would imagine. The FCC and Federal Trade Commission will have to monitor transparency and fairness of internet speeds to make sure that certain types of internet content, political or media websites, for example, aren't being throttled because the ideas expressed on those sites clash with those who control internet speeds. This is my biggest concern. Let me finish reading this here. If it sounds Orwellian because it has to do with idea suppression and technology, no, there's always been suppression of unpopular ideas. They were just in newspapers and on billboards. Now, they're on websites that host their own video. And once again, this is the real scary part here. It's bad enough for us to say that we're being treated unfairly, that we're being throttled, that we have to pay more money to access different services. But the real concern here for everyone should be just this: the fact that you can throttle certain websites because you don't agree with their ideas. Now that we have, I recently heard someone say that the government in the United States is basically an extension of large corporations because of the way that capitalism and because of the way that lobbying works. At a certain point, eventually, the bigger the corporation and the more money that they have, the more influence they have over government entities. I think that is undeniable. The scary part is that once enough of these corporations decide and have enough power to decide what information is easily accessible to the American public, that is the point when it's very easy to decide, to control the mind of the people through propaganda, through suppressing information, through controlling what you have access to, how easy it is to get, how much it costs. This is the real scary part of losing net neutrality. And I'm shocked that more people aren't outraged by the fact that this is happening. I suspect because what happens is that you offer people something in exchange in the beginning, and you make these changes slowly enough that it's not really as noticeable as it should be. So This sucks. You know, this is really terrible. And the fact that we have organizations like the FCC, who you would assume, you know, really when it comes down to it, isn't the function of any government organization to look out for the best interests of its citizens. I would think that would be the case. And at the same time, you know, we already see what's happening in other countries. You take a look at China, for example, and this is a sad thing when we talk about freedom of speech, which I am a big believer in, and I hope that the rest of you believe in all of the Constitution and not just picking and choosing the parts that you agree with, because I can't find a good argument against any of the Bill of Rights or any of the Constitution. I don't know of any arguments to say that, hey, we should get rid of these things. You know, they all make a lot of sense. The fact that Google has come out and said that they are going to cooperate with the Chinese government and allow them to have a search engine that is basically controlled by censorship. So Google is going to offer a Chinese version of Google that the Chinese government can decide what type of search results are available to people who are using it. That is really scary, especially from a company like Google, who we always kind of thought, you know, the whole, what's their tagline, their little motto was, don't be evil, right? Don't be evil. Well, if you're not going to be evil, you probably don't suppress information from citizens anywhere where you're doing business, right? And not only Google, but, and I want to say this up front, I know that Alex Jones is a kook. I know that some people are fans of his, some aren't, but either way you look at it, when you start saying, well, we're not going to let you talk anymore, whether or not you agree with what that other person is saying, that's a scary place to be. That's a bad direction for anyone to head. And it's discouraging that not only Google, Twitter, Facebook, all these different corporations who for the most part now are almost as much, they're almost as much of a communications company as AT&T or as Verizon or as any other Bell company. You know, anyone who is in control of communications. Now the new platform is this. It is YouTube, it is Google, it is Facebook, it is social media. Those platforms, again, and I know Alex Jones is out there, okay, and I don't necessarily agree with a lot of the stuff that he says, but to shut someone down because you don't like what they're saying, that's kind of scary. It's real scary, actually, and it's how a lot of bad things start. Ajit Pai, what a rotten little tomato. Yeah, I'm sure he's being paid well for it, playlist. Hey, good to see you, by the way. Harvey, how's it going? Johnny Chang, are you out there? I'm curious because I wanted to respond to your email. Being evil is very profitable. That's the truth, right? I mean, that is the bottom line. But at a certain point, there's a line you don't want to cross. And it certainly seems like we're heading that direction if we haven't already got there. So I hope something changes there. I may come back to that one a little bit. I've got two more things I wanted to get through while we're on here today. And one of them is the Sony Xperia, the Sony XZ2 Premium, which according to this article at least has an amazing low light video camera. And at the same time, if you read this article, they really did not like this phone. That's the bottom line. So every time I go on and I look at a new phone that's being released or a new piece of technology, you know, oftentimes you can pick up on a bit of a bias. You know, you may have someone who's a fan of Android writing a review of an iPhone or vice versa, and they're usually pretty tough on a brand that they don't necessarily like. So I'm not sure about the person who wrote this article, but it's pretty obvious that there were many features they found in this phone that they were not impressed with, which is unfortunate because I'm really hoping that we see another Android handset on the market that can give some competition to Samsung, because really when people buy an Android nowadays, they're generally buying a Samsung, right, in one of its forms or another. So the Sony impresses with the XZ2 Premium's video capabilities, but the overall package doesn't measure up to its high price tag. This is, again, according to this article. So they give you a couple things that they liked and disliked. Excellent 4K HDR display, good camera, good camera, good camera. That's what it says for the most part. And then a day-long battery life, which I think should be the minimum, really, that we should expect out of any handset nowadays. On the con side, they say a slippery, bulky design. Okay, fair enough, I suppose. I'm not sure. I think you'd really have to hold the phone in your hand to make that decision for yourself. Is it slippery? Like, what is it made out of, Teflon? Or is it the fact that the back is curved? I don't know, really. Low fingerprint sensor placement. I'm still of the opinion that no one has really nailed the fingerprint placement except for a couple companies who don't sell a whole lot of phones who put it onto the power button or the lock button, which personally I think that's where it should be. That's just my thoughts. Or maybe in the lower third of the screen, right? Inadequate video stabilization. That's a strange one when you have a camera that's got the best low light, or a phone with the best low light camera, but inadequate video stabilization. That's kind of important nowadays. Too much bloatware could probably be said for any phone. I mean any phone, including mine. And expensive, yeah. So if you're selling a $1,000 phone, it should do a whole lot of things that really none of them do so far, in my opinion. That's just me. So when it comes to the specs, at least, let's talk about what they're saying here. So they call this a ridiculously thick body and a dated 16:9 aspect ratio, and of course point out that it has big, thick bezels, which are what we're getting away from for the most part, right? So show the backside of the phone here. Let's see if we have another image. There's the backside again. There's the backside again. And you can see that the fingerprint scanner is actually pretty low relative to where the cameras are located on the backside of the phone. And it does look like it would be slippery. Again, I'd have to see the phone to know for sure. Here's the front. So the big argument, I think, is probably going to be this, that we've got so much of a bezel at the top and the bottom end of the phones. Fair enough, if that's a deal breaker for you. I totally understand. I am certainly in favor of having smaller bezels, but the taller these things get, the funnier they look to me, honestly, which is weird because, the longer screen, I suspect, is, one, going to allow you to have more icons on your screen, and of course, two, allow you to see a bigger image when you turn it into landscape mode for watching a movie, right? But so many people still take their phones in the vertical position that why would you need to have such a long screen? Your eyes can see more left to right than they can top to bottom without you having to move your head or your eyes around. So I'm not sure what the point of that is. But phones are certainly getting taller. So 16:9 aspect ratio, which they're calling outdated over here. It is, however, capable of capturing video up to ISO 12,800. And I would assume without getting too grainy, which is impressive, right? Especially if you're taking a lot of pictures indoors at night, outdoors at night. I guess it wouldn't matter either way. It's impressive, especially when compared to the Galaxy Note 9 and the iPhone 10. What? There's something better than the Galaxy Note 9 and the iPhone 10? I guess there is when it comes to low light cameras. But they say not enough to make them want to use the phone after the review period. So thick and heavy, okay, fair enough. Let's look at some more of the specs here. We have the dimensions, for some reason, are in millimeters, so we'll have to figure that one out. 157.48 by 78.74 by 12.7 millimeters and weighs 232 grams. Again, probably going metric because we won't see much of this phone here in North America. The Note 9 has 6.4-inch screen. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about their dimensions. We're talking about this. Gorilla Glass 5. The XZ2 Premium sliding out of pockets is more common than you think. Okay. It slid out of our pocket on the subway, on a plane, at a theater, and in an office. I sound like I'm reading a Dr. Seuss rhyme here. Though fortunately, we stopped it right on time. I'm just wondering, if the phone's sliding out of your pocket, how is that happening? Does it not have something to do with the design of your pocket? Why would your phone slide out of your pocket in the first place, unless maybe you have shallow pockets or you're sitting down at the time? I don't know. The point is, the phone will try to hit the floor any chance it gets. Okay, so it's on a suicide mission apparently. You definitely need a case. Good investment for everyone. Nobody likes it. I know. What are you going to do? Let's see. Let's look at some more specs. The main thing, of course, being $1,000. We have IPS LCD 5.8 screen. Oh, now you're giving it to me in standard measurement instead of metrics. 5.8 screen, supports HDR, and has 3840 by 2160 4K resolution, as well as 16:9. We already said that. And what else do we have? Strong performance and 2 3D bench. So this, I'd never heard this term before, so where have I been? The Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chip, but comes with 6 gigabytes of RAM And an Antutu. Oh, Antutu is the benchmark. Okay, Antutu 3D Bench 257 384 Geekbench 4 CPU 2415 single core 8272 multi-core, and Slingshot Extreme 3D Mark 3994 Vulkan. I don't know what that means, friends. Sorry. Phone runs Android 8.0, and they said they've got yet to run into any of the same software bugs on the XZ2 and XZ2 Compact. Biggest issue is how dated the software looks. I thought we had a few more specs down here. Let's see. Okay, so the highlight being its camera, particularly video. Starting with stills, the rear dual camera system houses a 19 megapixel f1.8 and a 12 megapixel monochrome with f1.6 aperture. It can capture up to 51,200 ISO for photos, and again 12,800 ISO for videos, which means it should be able to perform in low light conditions. Well, I would imagine. I suppose these are some of the pictures that they took. I'm guessing is what it looks like. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Let's see. In good lighting, the camera can take well detailed photos. Blah blah blah. And what else do we have here? It's quite a long article, I gotta say. Definitely an interesting read if you're after a Sony phone, which I've always thought that they made great phones, and as lately though become a little difficult to work on, unfortunately. Let's see. The camera can also capture slow motion video at 960 frames per second in 1080p. And let's see, what do we have here? What are we looking at here? 13 megapixel front camera takes selfies that are more than satisfactory. It even uses the display as a flash, so selfies look good in low light as well. That's interesting, actually using the display as a flash instead of having a flash on the front side of the phone. Battery life. 3,540 milliamp hour battery. After taking the charger off the phone at 7:30 a.m. with medium to heavy use, they'd end up with a little under 40% at 8 p.m. So you might be able to actually get through the entire day under normal use. It does support Quick Charge 3.0, which is cool, and does not come with a headset jack, but they do have a dongle included inside of the box. Let's see, 1-year warranty. You can get it at Amazon, Best Buy, and Focus, whatever that is. I don't know what Focus is. Let's see. Is there a better alternative? They suggest the Galaxy S9 Plus or the Huawei P20 Pro, if you can get a hold of one, of course. Otherwise, the Google Pixel 2 is the top pick. How long will it last? Well, get a case, obviously. Phone is IP6568 water and dust resistant, so it should be able to... What do you mean 6568? That's interesting, because usually you have IP6 for one thing and the 5 is for something else, but they say IP65/68. Sony has already promised an update to Android 9.0 Pie, and they've also explained in another article why it takes so long for Android to be updated. $1,000, yeah, it's a lot of money, I think. That's what we got here. Wayne Taylor, what's going on? Hey, I'm glad you joined us, Wayne, because this next article is all about Australia. I'm going to get to that in a second. Good to see you here, man. I hope you're doing well. Yes, great, another curved phone. Well, it's only curved on the back as far as I can tell, Harvey, so that's kind of good news for us. You will probably, yeah, it looks like the front is not curved, so I think that a tempered glass will actually fit on this phone. Of course, the back panel is going to be the problem because that is also Gorilla Glass 5 and not anything else. So obviously, Gorilla Glass or not, when it hits the floor a few times, you're going to have some trouble. Magic Mike, that's funny. I'll actually have a story about that. Next iPhone probably will be over $1,000 in USA. I'm counting on it, Greg. Cool, 5:30 a.m. Tuesday. Wow. Okay, so I got to remember you guys are ahead of us. And of course, when the new iPhone is released, you know that iFixit flies out to Australia traditionally so that they can buy the phone first because you're in a time zone that's ahead of us, and then they can do a teardown and tell us all about what's on the inside. So that's kind of cool. So here's a trippy one. And Wayne, I hope you can chime in on this because I think it's interesting. Curved backside is the real reason I hated my HTC One M8. Oh, you had the One M8. You know, I was never a big fan either, Harvey, but I gotta say that HTC, even though they're dying a slow death and just kind of barely hanging on when it comes to phones. Now, they're doing a lot of other things, you know, especially with VR that would make me... that's impressive. You know, they're doing a good job. not too popular on the handset market, especially here in the US. I think they're well below 5% market share at this time, and have not since the, well, I won't say the Evo, but I think since the Inspire have not been a lot of fun to work on. And that HTC, which one was it? What was the blue one? The one that came in blue and yellow and had windows on it. It wasn't the M8, it was the 8X. The HTC 8X, one of the coolest looking, and then they've always had great design from the outside of the phone as far as appearance goes. But when you got on the inside, it was kind of a big mess. I've given them credit for that, though. HTC designed some really cool looking phones, but they just, I don't know, for whatever reasons, not happening. Curved phones, great. I used to spread my Vegemite on my toast. Hey, you know, it's funny. Wayne was telling me a couple weeks ago about how popular instant coffee is in Australia. And for a minute, I kind of thought he was putting me on, and I had to go and do some reading. And wow, yeah, apparently, as you told me, Wayne, instant coffee, in particular Nescafe, which I'm going to have to try because I need to understand the fascination or the popularity of Nescafe instant coffee in Australia. I don't know why, but hey, man, I can't knock it until I try it, so I'm going to check that out for sure. Meanwhile, if you're living in Australia and you don't unlock your phone when you're told to, you might end up with 10 years in jail. So they're saying, according to this article, which is kind of weird. So a few different things here, and you know, arguments on both sides behind what's going on I want to get to in just a second. Yes, HTC are the worst to repair. So what this is saying here is that the Australian government wants to force companies to help it get at suspected criminals' data, and if they can't, it would jail people for up to a decade if they refuse to unlock their phones. Now, why? Well, the reasons are probably obvious. We have all sorts of, you know, new threats, or I should say relatively new threats, and people who could cause harm to public are using electronic devices to communicate and to store information that could assist in an investigation. So we understand that part of it, right? So that is the argument for being able to access whatever's stored on somebody's phone. Now, of course, along with that, we open up a big can of worms as to when, why, and how this would be a good thing, a bad thing, and maybe infringing on people's rights in the process, right? So this is where it gets really weird, especially if you go through TSA and they want to look at everything that's on your phone, which, you know, most of us store important information, in some cases personal information. I mean, who knows what you have? Whatever you're storing on your phone is your stuff, and without good reason. I want to say up front, you know, if someone has a warrant, if a court order says we're investigating this person and they need to allow us into their car, into their house, into their phone, whatever, that's one scenario, right? But there are some alternative things that might happen here that could be troublesome for a lot of people. So these companies would be subject to two kinds of government order that would compel them to help retrieve a suspect's information. The first of these is a technical assistance notice that requires telcos to hand over any decryption keys they hold. I don't even know if that's an issue. I don't think they're going to have any decryption keys. But this notice would help the government in end-to-end encryption cases where the target lets a service provider hold their own encryption keys. Don't know who that would be. Maybe if you're storing something on a cloud account, maybe that's what they're referring to here. But what if the suspect stores the keys themselves? In that case, the government would pull out the big guns with a second kind of order called a technical capability notice. It forces communication providers to build new capabilities that would help the government access a target's information where possible. Now, the big problem in some countries would be the government, right? And I'm not saying Australia specifically or the United States, but there are certainly governments that are in power today who, if they had this capability, could certainly abuse that power. And they could target people who dissented, or, you know, who for whatever reasons they had an agenda to pursue. And they could basically just go, hey, we're going to find everything there is that you're involved in, that you're interested in, that you talk about, that, you know, whatever it is, and somehow use that against you. And that would be one concern. Now, they've actually got a flow chart here as to how the industry assistance process would work. I'll let you look at that for yourselves. Again, the links to this are down in the video description. You can see the whole article. Quite an interesting read. What if the communications provider doesn't want to help, then they could face penalties from the government or injunctions or enforceable undertakings. The government can't force a company to build weaknesses into a product or stop it from fixing those that it finds. Neither can it access information without a warrant. Okay, fair enough, right? I mean, if you've got a warrant, you've gone before a court or you've gone before a judge, and they've just determined that there is, you know, if you want to call it probable cause or reasonable suspicion, or it's an investigation that's underway, you've got a warrant granted by the court, you go in and say, we need this information. Kind of makes sense, right? But there's always, you know, a few other concerns here. And one of them was an interesting one, I thought, down here in the comment section. I forgot my password. I thought this password would work, but it doesn't. Oh, well. How do we deal with that? First of all, will there need to be a new branch of thought police that just knows if you legitimately forgot your password or not? And obviously, this will be in a small number of cases, but once in a while, people do forget their passwords. Once in a while, people have devices laying around that they don't have the password to, and they bring it to us to try to get past that password because someone else thought they were playing a prank on them. They let their kids play with the phone and they somehow were able to change the password, or they really legitimately forgot what the password was. What happens in that case? Do you automatically go to jail for 10 years? And what happens when a criminal tries to use that as a reason for not unlocking the phone? Oh, sorry, I forgot it, or I don't know what the password is. It leads to some very interesting, you know, potential scenarios to emerge, right? Let's see what Wayne says, because Wayne is in Australia. Won't happen here. As a copper, it's never been a problem. We have our ways. Probably talking about Dropbox, OneDrive, that store the keys. That's kind of what I was thinking, was some sort of cloud storage, whereas Spider Oak has no way to get your cloud data since you as an end user hold the keys. Okay. And people here won't accept it. Ad judges here want 99.9% proof for any search warrants to be issued. Except, yeah, got it. So accept. Okay, and that makes sense. And this is kind of what I was, you know, the first thing that occurred to me was, this isn't just police officers going out and saying, hey, let me search your phone. These are supported by a court-ordered warrant, which obviously takes, you would think, some time to process, or at least there's some oversight there, and we make sure that it's happening for legitimate purposes, as opposed to, in some situations, we have what is called a rubber stamp warrant, which is if someone really needs a warrant, they want it right away, and no one has time to look at the information and say that this should legitimately be issued, they do have an easy way of acquiring that warrant. So I'm with you on that, and I understand what you're saying, Wayne. You know, when you say cops have their ways, and in dealing with criminals, you know, obviously there are techniques, I'm sure, that can be used to get the information that is pertinent to that case. As long as we don't have people abusing those methods, then we're okay. And, you know, if you look down in the comment section here, you'll see that the people who were involved in this, you know, read this article and wanted to offer some input. It seems like they're pretty much opposed to the entire process. And it's interesting. It's certainly a complex subject, but I feel like Australia is going down the wrong path here, and it's disappointing to see. That's from Anon. And then the one person who said something with the opposing view got voted down like crazy. Where was it? There was someone here, which I thought was interesting. And of course, this has to do with readership, because if you, no, I guess it wasn't. It must have been on another section where I was reading this. Oh, there we go. The principle is the same, making the penalty for failing to comply with the law about evidence gathering commensurate with the penalty for the offense that the evidence relates to, and he gets 12 downvotes, of course. So interesting stuff, but certainly something we're going to be seeing a lot of in the future, since everything is digital nowadays. Clickbait article, maybe somewhat, Harvey. I suspect that. And again, anytime I read an article like this, depending on where it's published, the majority of the comments will either be on one side or the other of the argument, because obviously they've got an established readership, if you want to call it, that goes there. You know, if you go to if you go to a conservative website or a liberal website, you'll see that most of the comments are in favor of whatever platform that particular publication caters to, right? That's how it happens. Hawaii Sidecar, what's happening? Yeah, a little late. I'm sorry, we're about to get off here in about 4 minutes, but thanks for joining us. You can watch the replay, of course, as can anyone else, and I will trim off that little introduction so you don't have to sit through the funky music and my weird quotations, which, you know, I just put those up there so that it kind of gives a signal out that we're about ready to start the live stream after 3 minutes. I figure that's about the right amount of time, right? So I find a phone book belted around suspect head. 5 minutes, password is given up. Yeah, I suppose so. So let's close this out, friends. I'm about to get going here. I will definitely be doing a live stream this Thursday evening, and we will certainly be getting more into having some guests join us. I had all sorts of stuff going on. I got to tell you, I am buried in phones right now. As soon as I end this, I've got to get some things shipped out and get back on the bench and start doing some work. We are starting to see a lot more of the iPhone 7 loop disease phones come in. What else? Still iPhone 6s backlights, still touch disease. I'm amazed because I had heard someone talking recently about how they don't see the iPhone 6s coming in as often, and we're definitely still seeing our share of those. So that could be a regional thing, of course, I would imagine. But I guess the good news for us is that Apple continues to make handsets that retain their value for the most part, and Apple continues to manufacture handsets that exhibit multiple issues after a certain period of time, generally after the warranty has expired. And this is the same with any manufacturer, But the good news being that because they still have value, people are still willing to have them fixed. So we still have a job for the time being. Been seeing some good videos you've been doing lately. Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm actually working on a video of that iPhone 7 boot loop disease repair where we replace the audio IC, and I've been cursed because the last 3 times I've tried to make that video, I either didn't hit record on the camera, something went funny on the video. I mean, it's like one thing after another. So if I have to stitch 3 different videos together, I will make it happen. But I think that's one that anyone who's doing micro soldering, you want to be ready to handle, because we're really starting to see a lot of those suckers come in. So that's about it for me for today. Thanks everyone for joining. I certainly appreciate you watching. If you haven't already done so, please hit the like button. It will help me out greatly. And if you got something you want to talk about on the next live stream, put it in the comment section or shoot me an email, whatever, and we'll definitely cover that. I will talk to you later. If I don't see you this Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we'll be back next week on Monday at 2. Have a great week.